Yo, 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 we have Jerry from Liminal Spirit and a slew of other bands. He was in Aura, which they came out with their last album in 2020, I believe. But yeah, he's been in a slew of different projects. He's a really, really talented guitarist. But I'm looking at his metal archive right now and a slew of different projects here, all doing all kinds of crazy stuff, vocals, guitars, programming, all kinds of crazy shit. But Jerry's rise to fame lately has been due to his Scale It Back YouTube channel, which initially we had him on at one point in time a couple of years ago after his blood incantation video kind of exploded, but he steadily um, released a lot of content on that channel, looking at various aspects of extreme metal, criticizing things that deserve to be criticized. Lately, he has taken a step back and he's focusing more on music. And his latest project is Liminal Spirit, which I would call like industrial ambient music. Uh, so it does have programmed drums. What I perceive to be like MIDI keyboards and some guitar in there, as well as like a robotic voice that Jerry's doing. Jerry, why did you decide to do this industrial project?
Well, I'm still doing the band Deorbit actively, but the guys wanted to take a break from jumping into new material. So I was trying to think of a way I can get some kind of music recorded without the need of other people. And came up with this idea. I wanted to do something a lot more spacious, and I do detest programmed drums. I always want to work with a real drummer to get an organic feel. That wasn't really possible here, but I was able to tinker around with some programmed drums and come up with what I thought was a palatable sound for a very minimal drum, a more percussion-based thing going on. There are no cymbals at all. The worst part of a programmed drum set is going to be the cymbals, so I just got rid of that, and I realized that I could that the idea of it not having cymbals to keep time kind of became part of what makes the project what it is, because it's the intent is to be a lot more meditative than what I normally do. I normally go from one thing to the other, and admittedly don't let a whole lot of stuff develop. With this, I wanted to have there be a lot more space for things to expand, and by not having there be something that you could count your rhythm with there being normally cymbals there, it's something that you can just kind of let guide you with more atmosphere than melody. But I still wanted to have a pretty strong melodic undercurrent. One of the things that I had never done before was more of a clean vocal. But with this, I was able to. I cannot sing. I will admit it that I cannot sing. But I'm using a synthesizer and vocoder, and it admittedly will correct my pitch because I do have a good melodic sensibility, but I don't have a palatable tone of voice, as you could tell just by my speaking voice. But I do have a degree in writing intensive English, and I've always wanted to do more pen to paper type of stuff. So I was able to get some lyrics written, which was exciting to do after such a long time not doing that, and piece it together by myself. And I'm really happy with the result. It's very different than what I normally do, and given that I don't need to rely on other people to make it come together, I can just make music and record it when I want. And aside from my work schedule, there won't be really much holding it back from getting more releases out there.
I see, I see. Yeah, one of the things about the music of Liminal Spirit, it's not diatonic at all, which a lot of metal isn't really that diatonic other than like power metal. Granted, there's a lot of diatonic scales in heavy metal too, but black metal and death metal, I guess like some of the melodic bands kind of stick to like diatonic scales and all that, but Liminal Spirit is not diatonic at all. Like you were talking about how the drums are programmed, you don't keep a steady rhythm throughout. You'll speed it up just to make it a little unpleasant, um, as well as the chromaticism that's going on. with the textures. It's not easy listening music, as in, it's not pleasant to listen to, but I think people with like death metal sensibilities, or noise, like harsh noise, or even, like power violence, they may be drawn to the kind of textures. And another thing you brought up is, you're trying to create that atmosphere, and there's been a lot of scholarly work about atmosphere and aesthetics. Let's see. I do have a paper here by Friedland Reidel. She's a professor out in Germany, but she does extensive work in aesthetics, focusing specifically on atmosphere. And the atmosphere for what was kind of gaining a lot of recognition nowadays in academe, with atmosphere and music. It's more of like a totality of the music itself is the atmosphere. Would you agree with that, Cherry?
I would. I've discussed on my channel how much I detest people going into music based on vibe, which I think is inherently different than atmosphere, but they're kind of two sides of the same coin. I really don't like the dissonant death metal scene, and that's entirely rooted in vibe. As much as I've been called as taking part in that with previous bands, it's not something that I share a kinship with mentally or in my heart at all. When I hear that kind of stuff, I just feel like it's more undulating textures to create a vibe. And as much as that can sometimes develop into what can be a consuming atmosphere, I feel like it's kind of not the same thing. It's more of like a attitude instead of just like an all-encompassing type of like blanket that makes the sound what it is. I talked about, there's been a few records I've liked this year, and a lot of them are very raw sounding, which adds to the atmosphere. And I think that, a lot of it can be done with purpose. Some of the earliest records might have been done that way on accident, but you associate that rawness with a lot of like the primal virtues going on in metal, and the immediate nature of it, and it's nothing that's too calculated. So when you hear something that sounds raw, or something that actually has an atmosphere to it, that where nothing is completely crystal clear, it becomes kind of its own entity. Whereas a lot of the modern metal records are super polished, and everything's naked, and you could see everything for what it is, and there's no backbone behind it. So it can. I don't like when atmosphere is used as a crutch, but if it's something that is another facet that makes the music what it is and ties the entire project together, that's something I think that is great. Like something like Reek of Putrefaction. If you listen to something like that, now you're going in because the atmosphere makes it what it is. Whether it was accidental or not, that record is a result of its production. And I've never really been able to come together with I've never been able to put together a record where it was atmospherically driven until this most recent one with Liminal Spirit. And it's a fun avenue to take, because I usually do concentrate on the melodies and making sure that the structures are inherently sound, and that the songs tell the right story. But now I have a new avenue to make that story be heard by having a focus on the atmosphere.
I see. Very, very cool. I'm glad you have a nuanced approach to atmosphere. I'll share that paper. Friedland Reidel wrote a very, very lengthy paper called Music as Atmosphere, Collective Feelings and Effective Sounds. And it's a phenomenological approach to atmosphere, kind of like a bit Heideggerian in a sense, where she uses phenomenology to look at the various aspects of atmosphere. One thing she does say, because there's always the argument in music, is like, well, everything's subjective. That's just your personal taste and all that. She actually argues essentially that the atmosphere is objective. And she uses the term asubjective, like, like not a theist, but an atheist. Like she uses the term asubjective. And I think it's a great term to use for atmosphere. But I'll send that paper your way. I think you might get it's rather dense, but it sounds like you'll be able to comprehend it. So Liminal Spirit, what like I understand it's like this industrial project that you're doing solo, but do you have any goals beyond conjuring up the atmosphere? Do you plan to turn this into like a full-time project, going out to venues and doing gigs, or just a recording project at home, and tweaking it as you go along, creating more and more releases?
I would love to do it live, but I can't see it really being feasible. If I were to do it live, it would be, it wouldn't really resemble what the record is because I do a lot of synth layers on it. There's a lot of guitar harmonies. I would have to have a pretty large ensemble to do it, but I have had visions of how it would look. And I don't want to ever play live with a drum machine, but I would like to have percussion live if it were to happen. But my goals mainly are just to put music out, and I know that the airwaves are super inundated, and it's going to be a drop in the bucket to try to get anyone to notice what it is. It's not an immediately gratifying release, as you said, because it focuses more on atmosphere and trying to allow patience for development as opposed to more immediately gratifying types of music. So my goal is just to make records. I really would like to do it live, but as for now, I have a lot of ideas of where to go with it. As for future releases, I just want to make as much music as I can. And anytime I'm not working, I just want to concentrate on that. You know, I'm getting up there in years and just want to get all the unreleased records from other projects I haven't put out, get it all out there, and just have it see the light of day, regardless of whether or not it gets heard by a lot of people or if material gets played live. I just want it to be documented because by the time it gets out, I'm usually already mentally on to the next thing. I always want to just keep documenting where I'm at in terms of my current mentality with the releases that I do.
I see. Yeah, you shared your black metal project. I apologize if I mispronounced this. Acanthropus, is that correct? Acanthropus?
Yeah, I called it a canthrophis, but it's kind of a play on a Latin term, so it's not a real word either way. But that is something I definitely would love to do the full length for. I think that EP was particularly strong out of the releases I've done. The band kind of fell apart, but I have a full length's worth of material to do. But I just really don't want to do programmed drums for that one since the music's really fast and all of the aspects of programmed drums that are horrible to hear are gonna come right to the surface if you have to hear it in that kind of medium.
Yeah, drum programming is it's a bitch. I understand what you mean about the cymbals too, where it does sound very artificial. I actually put reverb on them when I'm programming them just to help make them sound a little bit more authentic, but you can always tell that it's not a real drum kit. It's artificial. But yeah, definitely Acanthropus. There was some decent material in there that I enjoyed, especially later on in the EP. The last track especially. I feel like it's missing a little bit of something. Maybe it's an additional voice layer, whether it's keyboards or whatnot, that would help, fill it in and make it a little bit more complete statement. But from what I hear is you actually have a full album's worth of material that's even better, correct?
Yes, and I only started really messing around with synthesizers and such in the last like 2 3 years. So if I were to put out that full length that all the material was written for in like maybe 2018, I would probably add layers just because it is really fun and it makes you write differently. Even though the material's already been written, I would be able to come up with, as you said, that missing layer of like a backdrop and maybe even more atmosphere by using it. I used to be very, very anti synthesizer growing up, but it really does open up a lot of different avenues for getting a lot of layers in and making even a single person project just sound that much bigger.
Oh yeah. When it's used properly, I definitely agree with that. Now a lot of bands they use keyboards and it's just like a carnival backdrop, like it's carnival music as a backdrop.
Right.
But when it's used well, like an Emperor, Beherit, Beherit is just holding down one note in some of those songs, but it's very effective. It conjures up that atmosphere, and I'm very very happy you brought up atmosphere early on, because I do view the overarching atmosphere being very important to all of music. And another, this classical music. Unsure how familiarized you are of classical music, but there was a Romanian conductor, Selbadace, and he had a PhD in philosophy, and he had his own philosophy about music. And there's a video of him talking about his philosophy. He doesn't specifically use the word atmosphere, but it's really what it means. He wants people to experience music in person, not on a CD, because he viewed that digital recordings, it's its own little artifact. Like it's not a true representation of, like if you go to see a full symphony, everything's kind of manipulated through microphones and digitized, and so it's not the true authentic atmosphere of what's being conjured up in a concert hall. And I apologize if the dog barking outside is on the microphone. Here is Tom G Warrior Kiss, my second Doberman. And yeah, she's still a puppy and still very feral. But yeah, I'll include a link to the Celibidache if you're interested with that too, in the description of this episode. So it could be a little enlightening for some of the listeners out there, with the Celibidache and his philosophy, essentially about atmosphere and music. So we touched upon that you want to definitely continue the project, and it's kind of funny that you mentioned that you've only been messing around with synthesizers for a couple of years, because honestly to me, being that I've been playing forever, like in piano and all that, I could tell. But it's not to be mean or anything. I just think that it can be used effectively even if you don't have like a very sophisticated approach to synthesizers and piano and all that. Like the Beharit, like I made a noise a couple years ago of Marco Leho while I was in Finland, and he's not very savvy on keys, but what he does is very ominous. It's very beautiful. Even though it's super simple, but it doesn't have to be super complex to be moving. So there's definitely potential utilizing synthesizers regardless of your ability on piano or anything like that. So looking forward to how the project's going to evolve. For industrial, you have some influences listed. Let's see here. You had My Bloody Valentine, Shape of Despair, Godflesh, Jesu, and Nine Inch Nails. Are those true influences, or is just the type of crowds you're trying to reach out to?
I just listed stuff that might draw, like people that might see similarities between. I do love My Bloody Valentine. I do enjoy that kind of nauseating, pulling out of pitch stuff that is their signature, while still having like a pop undercurrent. I think that duality is really effective, and there is a lot of pitch manipulation on the record. And you could hear stuff like Godflesh in the second track on the EP, which is really an abrasive song. My goal was to have the record open with a really palatable, soothing song, and then break into that track, which is way more like harsh noise, kind of Godflesh types of rhythm. But as for the other things I listed, I really couldn't come up with a whole lot that it reminds me of. There is aspects of like Funeral Doom type of melodies in there, and some of the stuff I do at the very end of the record, I was like, oh, that kind of sounds like Shape of Despair. Not that that's a band that people really reference much. If they're going to talk about Funeral Doom, they're usually going to talk about bands like Skepticism. But I was like, okay, yeah, maybe I did kind of borrow from their playbook in terms of like synth tone and an approach for the end of that tune. Maybe I'll just list that there. But it was really just kind of not grasping at straws in terms of what I could list as as bands that people might hear this music referencing. Um, there is some stuff that I didn't realize that there are parallels between. I do like some as much, I'm an '80s kid, so I do like hearing vaporwave type of stuff. And there's a band called Black Moth Super Rainbow, which is like a really kind of saccharine type of vaporwave-ish type of band that I can hear some of this stuff having parallels to as well. They're a weird band, but they're very melodically. They have a melodic backbone, and they're a very atmospheric band too. But it's not metal in any way. But I could see some of the imagery that this music is developing in my head when I write it and play it. I can see parallels in bands like that as well.
I see, I see. Yeah, I'm not really into the vaporwave or retro wave or whatever it's called, but like the Miami Vice type of synth wave stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't like that. I don't like it when it's like cheesy to the point of like, oh my God, this is. I only like it on an ironic level, but I do like stuff like Perturbator, like stuff that kind of tries to mime like Terminator soundtrack stuff. That's all fine by me because that still has some menace behind it.
I see. Yeah, lately, well, I would say like 5, 6 years ago, Russian hard bass just exploded on the electronic scene, and now it's that funk stuff. I'm sure if you probably heard funk like in videos and all that on the internet, but that shit's just exploded. And a lot of those projects, they only like songs are only like a minute and a half to 2 minutes long. It just creates a vibe, and it's like this. I think when we say the word vibe, it's essentially just very disposable, very superficial.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and that seems to be just blowing up. I know Liminal Spirit, looking at the Bandcamp, it's only supported by 3 people right now. It's hard to gain traction, especially just releasing through Bandcamp. What I did was I ended up sharing codes with one of my joke projects in groups that would be interested in what I was doing, and that helped to drive up my fan base quite a bit. I think on Bandcamp, just with the Garden Gnome, it's close to 600 supporters who,
Holy shit, that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. Um, they've inputted their email addresses and downloaded. So a lot of them have donated money too. But like I said, you have to just kind of go out there and do the legwork. Reach out to online groups and share download codes. Now some people just download whatever, and their band camps have like thousands of releases in their collections. But there's other people that may like actually listen to it, so that could be an avenue for helping to get the liminal spirit out there, like going in industrial groups and all of that, and sharing Bandcamp codes.
I appreciate the advice because my Achilles heel has always been promotion. Like I really don't. I'm not that kind of guy. I'm not the check out my band guy. I've been around that guy my whole life. No one likes that guy. But I understand if I just put something out into the ether, no one's going to hear it. And I do want to be heard. As much as it's a selfish thing to say, I do want to be heard. I want people to hear what I'm putting into these releases and see if they can gain some of that experience. I understand that people are going to hear things a different way, but it would be great to have people just listen to it. I have it up. I tried to make it a free download, but Bandcamp is forcing me to have a dollar charge. But I don't care who downloads it. I would rather it be heard than anything. But yeah, that's a good idea. I definitely should do more in terms of promotion. I've worked with PR companies before, and they're all just fucking awful. They'll talk so much of a big game,
Oh
and
yeah.
then you
Well, they're
start
trying to get your
paying.
money, dude. They're trying to get your money. And
Right, you
they
start
have their
paying, and then you see what they. I couldn't believe the last cycle that I paid for. I thought I was going to get something out of it, and it was essentially just a slew of hits on sites that literally no one reads at all. and it was just blanket questions for interviews that had nothing to do with the music. One of the questions was like, well, or actually, the entire review was asking me questions in hopes that I could answer from my dog's perspective. It was like a dog based metal website, and I'm like, and I told the guy, I'm like, this is a waste of my time. I hired you to try to get listeners. I am not going to be filling out these ridiculous answers for this site that no one cares about. That's completely ridiculous. And he's like, you got to do it. It's, you're just trying to get your foot in the door. This will lead places. It super didn't, and it was complete waste of time and embarrassing to do. But I understand, everybody's out there making music. For as much as I love the ease that I was able to put this record together with, just the fact that I could record everything on my computer and then just have it mastered, and now I have a record. And the bass player that I've had in a number of projects with me since like the turn of the century, he's also does all the graphic art for any release I do. So I've got a record making factory here, but it's the promotion that I'm just super terrible at, and I do need to get better at it. And I don't really make music that people want to hear, so that's also gonna hurt the progress. But I'm sure there's an audience for this. It's just a matter of finding out where it is, and there might be an overlap within metal, but there might be an overlap in industrial, but it doesn't really sit comfortably in any of those genres or subgenres. So it'll take some digging, but I do appreciate the advice with the Bandcamp codes. I'll look into that.
Oh yeah. There's definitely a lot of dark ambient and industrial groups out there on the internet, like on Facebook and all that. That there's people that love getting download codes. So yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Now you're probably not going to break even on it. So I think it's like $3 for like 100 Bandcamp codes. You may not get those $3 back, but um, over time, like with the Garden Gnome, I've definitely turned a profit on that. Uh, which wasn't my intent. I was just rabble rousing the dungeons and scene. Um, but yeah, it turned into be quite lucrative in some aspects.
That's
Uh,
great.
yeah. Um, so you're very opinionated, Jerry. Let's
I
get into
am.
some of those opinions. Listeners out there, you probably have noticed that I haven't been really involved with the discussion episodes on Necropolis. Just me personally, I do view that type of format with the same recurring individuals to be quite stagnant. So I will be moving this podcast more into like what we're doing here with Jerry, just interviews and discussions with various individuals rather than the same. The group discussion stuff I believe will still happen, whether it's on Necropolis or a spinoff podcast on hate meditations. But I will not be involved with that. I just feel that I'm more geared towards talking to, the world rather than having an insular group where after so many episodes, with the same individuals, it's just you're just kind of nodding your head at each other, and you're not really breaching into more. I view it as being kind of intellectually stagnant, but I understand there is a listenership out there. I do appreciate the people that come back and listen to the podcast, including the discussion episodes. But I think moving forward, it's probably best for me just to do interviews and stuff like we're doing today. Jerry, what are your thoughts on podcasts?
Well, this is a bit of a double-edged sword. I essentially retired the channel a few months ago because I started to realize, and nothing against your podcast at all, I do think there's value to be had if there is like a pithy thing that you're talking about. But I started realizing that podcasts had replaced the music listening experience, and nowadays, if people are going to be listening to something, it's going to be some asshole talk while they're driving, just something to fill the air, to like a nice distraction. And most of the people I talk to, even metal people, listen to more podcasts than music nowadays, and that's never been something that I've gravitated towards. If I'm gonna take the time to fill my ears with something out aside from the outside world, it's going to be music. I still love music. I still love making music, listening to music, and I'm still constantly looking for a new artist that makes me inspired. So as much as I am intrigued by certain subjects that podcasts are going to be talking about, I would rather listen to a band or a musician or something that's a record that is something that I have to mine for the statement in. Like I don't want someone's opinion blasted on me all day long. I want to hear a piece of art and gather the from the experience what that person is saying. I think that's a much more rewarding thing to do with your listening time. But I know that since I think there's a big parallel between podcast culture exploding and people becoming recluses after the pandemic, where people deep down still want to connect with people, but they don't want to do it in person. And now they feel like they're connecting with everyone by listening to their podcast, whether it's a celebrity or an everyman. It's still you're hearing people, and there's a few things I do listen to too. Is I don't have a strict ban on them on principle. If you would have told me years ago that what people would be doing when they put headphones on is listening to people talk about shit instead of music, I would have never believed it. And that's kind of where things are at now, and it's surprising. And I'm excited that it is allowing me to have an avenue to talk with you about stuff. I think that's great. You being in Texas, me being in Wisconsin, we're able to talk about shared interests on the internet. It's fucking awesome. But it is frustrating to know that this medium is prioritized over listening to music. It is crazy to me.
I just think it's the culture we're in right now. It's a very superficial and disposable type of approach to entertainment, where like I did share that article with you earlier. I know you haven't had a chance to read it, but it was a good research paper on Florida death metal, how it came about and the scene and all of that. And now it's like the conclusion that you have after reading it. It's like, well, since the fucking 90s, like the mid to late 90s, death metal has been turned into a commodity. It's a product. It's so you have like this big stream of innovation where metal was an open book, no uh, trajectory. It was just everyone finding their own voice, carving out the expression. Um, and after that expression was solidified, they've just been reinforcing it. And since then, it's been really dumbed down, and a lot of the bands are functioning essentially as Shirley likes to say, small businesses. And it's very true because there's a release schedule, a touring schedule after a release, and it's an assembly line nowadays with a lot of metal bands. And just as a curiosity, I was checking out various bands on Spotify and the listenership on that. And you know what the fucking most popular shit is? It's metalcore.
Not surprised.
Metalcore is the most popular, and then deathcore has a pretty big listenership as well. And then you look up, like death metal and black metal bands, it's a fraction of the percent. So in that regard, I do view metal as being dead, and what's alive, still going, is more of just like a old man reinforcing, his own youthful expression, but just in a really like commodified way where it's a product. And uh, I understand I've drifted off course. And we're talking about podcasts, but I think the music itself, a lot of the times, is very waning, and it's just really part of this disposable culture we're in, where, yeah, a lot of people prefer to listen to podcasts and what they get from these podcasts too. Like you listen to a Joe Rogan, and he has on a anthropologist or some shit like that, or archaeologist, and you have like you listen to it and you hear, you're exposed to these ideas and researches, but you have a very superficial level of knowledge being exposed to that. It's very, very surface level. You don't really have like true knowledge of what is being discussed on podcasts when you go to like different subjects like that, or even UFOs. I know Joe Rogan's big into the UFOs, and it's more people just kind of musing themselves rather than you know, really laying out the data, like in an academic setting or anything like that. So I do view everything's just kind of coalescing into this very superficial culture. And I hate to say it, this podcast, I do value the voices that have been on it, but some of those discussion episodes was just kind of just entertaining the people out there. It was just, yes, we are injecting some of our opinions, but um, a lot of it just became a bit of a chore. Yeah, definitely agree with you that I don't think podcasts themselves are really a good influence on the music culture as a whole because, like you said, people are more interested in people talking about music rather than listening to it. But you also have to look at the music that's being released. It's a lot of the times it's very inferior to what like the classics in the '90s and all that, the late '80s. So, yeah, I personally view metal as being dead, and I do value your approach to just doing just an industrial project. It's not metal at all. It's just yeah, let's go metal adjacent and do whatever the fuck we want to do because at this point in time, I think that's really needed. I think we need to stop supporting all these geriatrics touring every fucking year and start looking at things from left field a little bit more. Now, not necessarily Mephitis, we'll get to that later, perhaps in an article that I'll write for Hate Meditations because it's long overdue. But what's your general thoughts? I know I've rambled on about the superficiality of the music being released today. I've seen your channel, and I think you would agree with a lot of that, but do you have any additional thoughts on that?
Well, I do agree with you about metal being dead. I don't share the bitter man view of it dying in '93. I think it lasted a couple years after that. I haven't been too thrilled with anything I've heard since the turn of the century, aside from very, very sparse releases. But my enjoyment of it isn't what makes it dead. It's about that vitality not being there, like what you've mentioned, where you have this wellspring of inspiration, and like with the Floridian death metal scene, everybody coming in around the same time, despite the fact that all of those bands are, proximity really close. They still sounded very different from each other, and now we have endless information, endless influence, and still every new band sounds the same. And I would love to have that be a handicap of mine where it's just me getting old, but I can pinpoint why it sounds the same. And it doesn't matter to people that it sounds the same because it's ticking the right boxes. And that was never my attraction to metal. I never had an idea of what I wanted metal to sound like, and I wanted bands to kind of fit that mold. As much as people like me are going to be talked about as being very restrictive in what we want out of the genre, what I miss is the innovation, and it's just not there. Everybody can play circles around me on guitar. The skill ceiling is through the roof. But if you're just playing uninspired nonsense, what good is it? It's like a carpenter can have the most skill and the best tools, but if they don't know how to build a basic fucking house, what do you have? And that's just how I feel about it, because I still go down the YouTube rabbit holes and click on anything with a death metal logo in hopes of finding something that takes me back to what I used to feel when I would listen to that as a kid. And none of it does. And every once in a while, there will be brief snippets of it where I can hear some of that spirit and I get drawn in, and then it's not elaborated on, or it's just there in the most superficial sense. But a lot of it that doesn't work, like what you had mentioned before, is the atmosphere. Because there's plenty of these bands, like I said, that can string together a halfway like comprehensible like type of song, and it'll work on paper. But when there is absolutely no life to the way it's presented, if it's just super like naked and you could hear every single thing, and there's it exposes all of the vulnerabilities in the composition when there's that type of production, and the atmosphere being so sorely lacking, and it just feels like these bands are just being processed out of a plant where they just have the EQ settings of what death metal should sound like, and it all just ticks those boxes, and all the drums are sound replaced. They take the stems of each hit and then they make it so that there's no dynamics, and every hit is the exact same velocity, and it just sounds completely inorganic, and there's no trademark characteristics between each band, each release from a singular band. None of it has character. And I do think that as much as we probably exhausted a lot of the potential between the pioneer genres of metal, your death and your black and so on, I feel like there is still so much potential just because melody is infinite, and your personality can direct how you want the atmosphere of the record to sound. Like, none of the records I've done have the same EQ settings. They all sound different because that was what I wanted to present at the time. And now it's just every single YouTube click I do, I can't even tell you what the bands are. It's just like they're all doing the same kind of motifs. They're doing the same production. And I don't want to think that the human potential in understanding how to construct melody in a metal sense has been completely exhausted. It can't be. I just think it's the wrong people that are putting out music. I still think it's the people. It's the people that are the problem. And
there's not a fan base for it either. They're like in the '90s, like early '90s, Morbid Angel, like with Covenant, they sold 150,000 records. That's unheard of today. The fan base for extreme metal, like death metal, black metal, all that, it's just not there. It's all like the newer generations with the metalcore and deathcore and all that, where that is financially lucrative. So there's not really much incentive for newer, extreme metal artists to go out there and express something new. Um, what tends to be profitable is pandering to what works, and what works is essentially just a sterile approach, just rehashing shit that's already been done before. And you can tell with some of these, especially like Bloodbath and bands of that ilk, the super groups and all that. There's a big hard rock influence of how they structure their songs. So that just goes to show like how they are pandering in a way, even with the song structures, of mass listenership, mass consumption. So it's a commodity at this point in time. I do agree that melody is quote unquote infinite, but then I think we're at this junction where for the past 20 years, I think there really hasn't been much noteworthy releases. And I do think it's, time just to just go metal adjacent, like with your Liminal Spirit, and I did with my GoCraft project, because it's just your own type of expression. You're not chained to any styles at all. It's do whatever the hell you feel like doing, and create your own expression. I think there's more value in that than coming together, creating a death or black metal band that sounds like 100 other bands out there. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I agree. I just, I'm a lifer. I don't want to let it die. As much as I do agree, it's hard to put it down. When it's such a commanding force for me, all day long, I either have old classic metal songs in my head, or I'm thinking about the next song or riff I want to put together. Just the idea of it, being completely dead is a tough pill to swallow, because I do love and appreciate it as an art form so much. But it has not had vitality in so long, and it's been lampooned for so long, where any of the any of the idea of it being a serious art form is now gone. As soon as you're branded as an old school sounding death metal band, it becomes in line with tribute music, and tribute music can't be viewed as powerful. It's a reference point. So it's the idea of the identity is completely gone. It's now you're participating in what people know a genre will sound like, as opposed to wanting to expand the borders of the genre or find your own unique voice within the genre. Now, if people want to try to have a unique voice or force a unique voice out of a person that doesn't have it, they'll just smash two established genres together, and you
Yeah,
have
there's a
what
lot of avant-garde, quote unquote avant-garde metal bands. Like they'll throw in all these unconventional instruments into a metal band. It's like, hey, we're special, we're being unique, and what they're actually doing is like I know Imperial Triumphant. They had Kenny G just as a novelty perform with them or on a record. And there's a shit ton of bands that do that. They bring in these. Um, Non-metal instruments into the metal format just to be quirky, but the vast majority of times it does not work at all. It doesn't really add anything to the expression. It's just superficial to the max.
well, saxophone especially. Saxophone is like the least subtle instrument out there. Like it's you cannot integrate that into a mix. It is the lead voice, no matter what's happening. And Imperial Triumphant, my exposure to them has been their music videos, which are so ham-fisted to me. Like I'm just so exhausted by the eyes wide shut imagery and the whole there's this underground of elites. Like I just don't care if it's out there, and I'm sure it is. I just don't care. Like it's come up with something better, come up with something a little more commanding. But what the reason that Kenny G got involved in that, as far as I understand, is his son is, I think, in Imperial Triumphant, and his son is a metal fan and has other different metal projects. He has one called The Mantle, which I actually listened to all of the record. It's like a whole hour long, and it is, it's modern, so it's already gonna be what you expect, but it's not awful. It's within that, like, progressive modern death adjacent type of more like modern core based shit, but it's not horrible. So I think that's just an anomaly of Kenny G's son actually kind of liking metal, which is surprising. And he got his dad to take part in their video, because wouldn't it be crazy if we did that? Like that stuff is kind of what takes all the teeth out of metal for sure.
Yeah, I got a funny anecdote with that. So it's come full circle for me. I didn't know his son was in the metal and was in the band, but when I was like 10, my grandmother got me a Kenny G album because he had long hair. She thought it was metal. So it's come full circle.
Well, circular breathing is pretty fucking metal, and I will give him that, because I've seen him hold a single note for minutes on end, and I'm like, okay, that's pretty sick. But then you realize it's Kenny G, and you want to change the channel.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm looking at the cover of this Liminal Spirit. How did this artwork come about? It looks really cool.
So the music, I don't know if you read the super pretentious synopsis that I wrote for it, but the goal of the music is to make it feel like the listener is passing through a portal at some point. So what I tried to do for each song is develop a theme and kind of exhaust the potential out of the theme, and then have it break with either an extended segment where it's minimal, or have it be a sudden shift and then a completely different thing. Because normally I'm very, very arrangement focused. I do not want to have from A to Z. I do not want to have any of the parts feel out of place. So with this one, I came at it with more of a this is how I want each song to to develop, and I do want there to be a shock between parts. So I wanted to have the cover reflect the idea of people passing from one side of a portal to the other. And I gave like a really shitty sketch to Jim, my bass player in other bands, and the graphic artist I always lean on, and he designed that, and I think it is awesome. I really love it. He always surprises me. I sketched the Deorbit cover art, and he put that together. It looks amazing. I don't like a lot of graphic art. I like paintings and shit that looks real, but he really does use he gets the most out of modern techniques to make it feel like it's a real organic piece of art. And I'm really happy with that cover. I think it definitely ties the listening experience together.
Very cool. Yeah, definitely a killer artwork there. And thank you for elaborating on it and telling us the history and all that. But yeah, it definitely makes it stand out quite a bit, and I do think it suits the music. Uh, but yeah, for a Liminal Spirit, I think we've kind of exhausted talking about it. Anything else you want to add in regard to the release?
No, just you can listen to the whole thing on YouTube or on Bandcamp. I do need to try to get it across in other mediums, but that's where you could hear it if you're interested. For those listening, it would be awesome to get more people to check out the record.
Yeah, it's definitely different. And I you can tell Jerry's not too versed in creating synthesizer music, but it's not bad at all. You can usually tell when someone doesn't really have a voice at all and they go in and make synthesizer music and it just sounds like ass. But you can definitely tell he's trying to create the quote unquote atmosphere of what he's doing here. So I'll definitely include a link to the Bandcamp in the description. But yeah, anything else you want to chat about before we wrap up today, Jerry?
No, I think we covered a pretty wide range of topics, and thanks again for having me on. It's very appreciated.
Yes, sir. I know tomorrow you're going to go get a sandwich. So,
I am.
can you tell us about why you're driving 2 hours to go get a sandwich?
I am a bit of a glutton, and despite growing up near the Chicago area, I went to school at Marquette University and just stayed here after that, mainly because I was in bands, and now I'm just kind of rooted. But found out there is a viral sandwich going on at a place called Rico Benny's in Chicago, and it's simple on paper. It's just a deep fried breaded skirt steak sandwich that's completely dunked in a marinara sauce and put on a French roll with cheese and jardinera. And it's simple. Anyone can do it, but for some reason, people are saying this might be the best sandwich in America. So I showed it to my friends, and they're like, "You want to do something stupid?" And I'm like, "Absolutely, pretty much all the time." So I'm going to take one of the few days I have where I'm not consumed by work and drive to get a sandwich and then come right back, because that's the kind of guy I am sometimes.
I see. Yeah, I've been up to your neck of the woods. Went to Wild Rose, Wisconsin with an ex, and we got snowed in for 5 days. Stuck for mom. It was horrible. And yeah, there wasn't even, I think there was maybe like a six pack of beer. Definitely not enough to keep me entertained.
That
Uh,
sounds awful.
so yeah, is it very cold and snowy up there right now?
It's actually been one of the most mild winters so far. I think the worst is yet to come. But I have not fallen on ice and fucked my knee up yet this year, which is exactly what happened last year. So I'm thankful for that. But I work in roofing. I'm a project manager for a roofing company, and the elements are constantly governing my day. And I'm about to start a project this coming week. It's new construction, and I'm just praying that we have weather that enables it to work.
Oh shit.
'Cause
How is Trump coming in office and deporting all the illegals? Is that going to impact your business?
I don't want to get into that too much, but I will say um, some people are worried. Other people that have, I work with a pretty much exclusively Hispanic crew, and thankfully my high school education in Spanish speaking is the one thing I retained from it. But What's surprising is if you were to talk to a lot of the Hispanic population that came here the right way, and are legal, they do not like illegal immigration. They're hardworking people. They want to do things the right way, and I don't want to get into how my company operates. You're going to find people that are undocumented pretty much in any business, but I think that there may be a reckoning, there may not be a reckoning. I don't know, but either way, we don't have much to worry about on our end, surprisingly. But it will be interesting to see how other industries or other construction companies are going to be affected by it for sure.
Yeah, I might have to get a new yard guy. Holy shit. All right, Jerry. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. I'll definitely include some of that liminal spirit for the listeners to check out. Thanks
Awesome.
for
Thank you so
listening.
much.
Yes, sir. Have a great rest of your day.